Hi there, Dave Career from IBM. This is just a really quick follow-up to a previous video that I released around how to create a MQ Developer Edition container running in Docker. This is sort of a quick follow-up on that, on how to expand on that particular scenario where we're going to add a persistent layer. And using a Docker volume, we're going to externalize that persistent layer so that when we stop the container and delete it, we can kind of bring it back to life and reattach it to the persistent data store that has the configuration settings. So in the previous example, we did not do that. So if you were to run that example, stop the container and delete it, you've now lost all of your changes. I'm going to show you a really quick example of how you can persist that top layer, which is the read-write layer of a container, into a data volume that's external from the container so that we can bring it back to life if we choose to remove the container at a later time. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so if you watched the previous video, we went through the steps that it takes to create just the default MQ Advanced for developers container and get it running, and we can actually use it. It's all great, but it's not practical because when a container starts, the top layer is the read-write layer. This is a layer that's created when you invoke the docker run command and a container starts to run. It creates a top layer. Now it takes the images, and it is true that the images below this top layer is immutable. You cannot change them. It's still in the repository. You're not going to be able to change it, but you can change the read-write layer that's added when you start a container. So how does this work? It's a union file system. So that's something you can go look up, and this is true for Docker. You can go look that up and get a lot more details on what a union file system is. But what I just want to point out is it is possible to change files in a container that are in some of those bottom layers. But in reality, what's really happening is a copy of that file is being placed at the read-write layer, which is your top layer. That's where your files are going to be stored that you can change, and they override anything that's lower level, okay? So this is all how a container works when it's running. So let's talk about this. One of the questions I always get is, hey, my changes, they persist when I stop the container and restart it. Totally true. Yes, they do, because that top layer is part of the container, and when it's at rest, stopped, those data files still exist. Your container is still there. It's just not running. So all of that persisted data, it's in the container. If you restart that container, it will start and all of your changes will be saved. However, when you issue the docker rm command, which is the docker remove command, all of those changes at that top layer, they're part of the container, and it got removed and it's in the trash, gone. So this is kind of the myth. When you don't really fully understand how it all works, I'm gonna help you understand this. So how do we actually take the read-write layer that holds the state for the container as it's running? How do we externalize that? We do that through a thing called a data volume. So you have the ability to externalize where the data is stored for that top layer, and you do that through a Docker volume. So we're going to walk through some steps on how to create a volume and then create a container that's going to use that volume for the read-write layer. This will allow you to stop the container, delete the container, create a new container and attach it to that volume and bring your container back to life. Okay? So one of the things that I want to help you understand is this whole process from start to finish. Okay? We're going to walk through this step by step just in a few minutes. Okay. So what commands are we going to run to make this happen? There's a couple of them. The docker volume create command, this one right here, this command is going to create the data volume. So then we're going to do a list volumes, make sure that it's there. And then we'll do a quick inspect of the data volume, and this will kind of show you some details about it. Most importantly, where is it stored on your local machine? This will tell us. Once we have the volume created, we're going to issue the docker run command. So this is the same command that we ran in the previous video with one exception. The exception is the volume command. We're going to tell it that we want to use the volume QM data, QM1 data, which is the volume that we're creating up here. So that will attach that top layer to our container. All right, let's get started. So first thing we're going to do is docker volume Okay, we have created our volume. Let's take a look and just make sure that it's created. We'll list the volumes and we can see that it's here. The data volume is created, and so let's just inspect this. So let's see what the details are. Okay, so looking at this, I can see that the mount point for this is right here. That's where my data for that top layer, that's where it will be stored. Now, because I'm running a Mac and the Docker desktop engine running on the Mac is actually running in a virtual machine, so you have to get into that virtual machine to see it. But if you were running this on Linux or Unix, that's exactly where it would be stored on your machine, is in the var live docker volumes directory. So now that we know that our container volume directory is created, it's there, now we need to run that docker command that is the docker run command to use that particular data volume. And I think I still have it here. This will help me from typing it all out. So here I have the docker run command, same command that we did in the previous example. The only difference being is this one has a volume that we're going to use. So let's go ahead and run this. And it is up and running. Let's take a look at it. And it's up and running. Everything looks good. So I think we're ready to take a look at the container and make sure that everything is up and running. We can get to the console. All right, I've opened a web browser and we're going to take a look at the administrative console for MQ. So let's fire up the web browser to the right address. And it is localhost 9443 and IBM MQ/console. And since it's the first time we're logging into this, it's given us the connection is not private. That's okay. The certificate is what it's complaining about, but that's all right. It's just running on our local machine. We didn't add any certificates. This was expected. Let's proceed. And the default user ID and password. We're in. Okay, so this is all good. We can look at the queues. Let's go ahead and create a new queue. I already have a test one here. Let's create another one. And we're just going to create a local queue. And we'll call it test 2. And we'll keep all the defaults. So I can see that we have test 2 and that one is created. We have a new queue. Everything looks good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and bring back my terminal window, and let's do a docker stop on this container. The container is stopped, so let's remove the container. So I have removed the container. just to see there's no containers running. Let's make sure there's no containers that are in there that are stopped. So I do have one container, but it's not related to this. It's a different container, but I have effectively removed that container. Now let's look at the volumes. So my QM1 data volume still exists. So that top layer and all the configuration data for that particular container is still existing on this machine. So if I want to bring this container back to life, and I can prove that this is not running because this should say, yep, nothing's there, can't run it. So let's go ahead and recreate the container. And this time, same command, I'm going to make sure that it uses the same data volume. So it's going to reattach the volume that is still existing on my machine, but it's going to create a brand new container. It'll likely have a different name on the container, but that's okay. It should still work. So let's give it a shot. And it looks like the container is up. Let's check. And I can see, yes, the container has a new name. It is up and running. Just to show you that again, I'll bring it to the top. There it is. So I have a different name for my container. It's been up for 20 seconds. Everything is up. So let's go check to see if the queue that we created in the previous container exists on this new one. So we're going to have to log in again. Localhost 9443 IBM MQ/console. And again, I get this because it's the first time we're firing this container up. We'll come in, we'll need to log in. And we are logging in. Things look pretty good here. Let's check to see if that container exists. And let me just bring my browser up. There it is. It worked. So there you have it. This is how you create a persistent data volume that will externalize that top layer so that you can remove containers and contain the data externally so that you can persist it. And then you can bring this container back to life at any time by reattaching it to that top layer. That's it. Thanks for watching.